Okay, welcome to my large format ghoulish game board, or maybe it's a monster map. Kind of done in the spirit of Halloween approaching, be here before we know it. This is a 10 by 16 inch piece of semi-gloss paper. It's very close to matte paper in terms of the finish on it. And I'm working on it because I want to be able to, first of all, get some really good impressions on it from that semi-gloss coating. But I don't want it so glossy that I can't use colored pencils on it, which I really do utilize later on in the coloring process of this scene. Okay, 3 different boulders with trees there in the corner. I wanted to create kind of a little bit of a canyon or corridor for someone to enter this kind of map scenario. My idea for this piece was kind of creating somewhat of a kind of a amusement park map type of thing, you know, where you can see different types of zones within this piece. And here we have these hands here. I wanted them kind of coming out of some water or the swamp area here, and they're flanked by the boulders with lichen there. I'm stamping out kind of a smaller portion of this boulders with lichen. Most of the impressions here will just be a portion of it, mainly the top, to create a little bit of a kind of a passageway going through this swampy area, okay? Using the pebbles stamp right here to create some textural shadows being cast by the boulders with trees there, and also adding a little bit of texture at the base of the boulders with lichen there. Because the idea of that is, again, to create a little bit of a pathway for someone to enter the scene or the map, and to, come out the whatever side, I decided to create, the exit for. And at this point in time, I really didn't know what I was doing. I just knew that I wanted a bunch of different ecosystems, or scenes, you might say, and to integrate them together. Okay, by the way, those hands are by 100 proof press, and the creature of the Black Lagoon was a Ken Brown stamp. Probably discontinued in the 90s or something like that. I think I found it in a used stamp section at Viva Las Vegas Stamps. Okay, stamping out several different impressions of the cypress cluster here to create that swampy area. And things were going pretty good right now. I was doing a lot of repetition of imagery here because I knew that there was going to be a lot of images used, but I also wanted some visual continuity throughout the piece by utilizing the same stamps repeated times rather than just once. Okay, I'm going for the island mountain up there in the corner I was thinking about kind of a lava type of situation, or I don't know, Mount Doom or something like that type of scenario, but I changed my mind kind of going into this piece. Okay, that's the Seaside Cove there. Pretty centralized up in the corner like that. And here's a stamp by Edward Gorey, okay? Another stamp that was from a discontinued set, and probably brand as well. I incorporated a lot of these kind of little monster pieces from my private collection of stamps that I've accumulated over the years. Okay, Pines and Rocks, small here, to create my transition zone for what is going to be my sky area above those trees, okay? And I wanted to create a, transition between the boulders with trees and these pines and rocks here. So adding them right behind those pines and rocks images there. All right, a stamp by, I think that was 100 proof press as well. Maybe Gumbo Graphics. And here is an ant, which will ended up being kind of representing a gigantic ant or something like that. Maybe from the movie Them, if you know what I'm talking about. There is my crooked path leading the viewer's eye up through that little passageway. And then I had this stamp from Bizzaro. It's a kind of a silhouette of a guy holding a woman, and I thought that's kind of what that creature of the Black Lagoon was doing. Okay, this is my rock 1, and I'm creating these rock, kind of I don't know, whatever you use, stones going through this swampy area. And it's to represent kind of a passageway for my little characters to be able to navigate their way through this map to get through, you know, to get to where they're going. So we had to have something, you know, that they can kind of step on in the form of these stones. And I'm just using a smaller portion of that rock stamp the farther it goes up there. Okay, so this is a octopus here. I think this was from a Fistful of Stamps, another company that's no longer around. All right. Yeah, you can, I don't know, you can mix and match, you know, there's other types of images out there that you can, you know, use as a replacement if you want to create this type of scenario here. Okay, that's the palm cluster up in the corner, trying to make it, you know, kind of a little tropical area, and I'm closing off that open area there with some fronds, okay, palm fronds. That's palm frond number 3. And going into my area here to create some textures, I want to create a path. So I was being, you know, kind of careful to get some of that texture in there, but I don't want to just close it off because I want it to be somewhat of an illuminated map area, or pathway, I should say, not map, but pathway. And so I do want to incorporate all these different areas though too, so I'm utilizing rocks here. The first rock was tiny rocks, and then this one is called pebbles. But I'm kind of using pebbles as a toning instrument. I'm kind of tapping it down at the base of, you know, at the bottom of things like trees, you know, like the pines and rocks here. And the more you stamp it out, the more it becomes just kind of a tonal texture with some tone in it, or tone. Let me reverse that. It's some tone with some texture in it. Okay, you just kind of tap it down and repeat it like that. So having these kind of common textures throughout all these different environments or scenes within this whole piece will give the piece a little bit more kind of visual continuity going from one to the next. So, you know, so I'm utilizing this kind of tapped pebbles stamp in most of the different zones. I'm not sure if I used it around the creature at the Black Lagoon, but I do have it at the base of the boulders with lichen image. Okay, so what kind of horror scenario would there be without a full moon? Just added that up in the upper left-hand corner. And I'm filling in that space around the moon with cloud cumulus, okay? Always kind of having the cloud kind of pointed in the direction of the light source, which happens to be the moon. But I'm going to make that eyeball kind of more central to the composition here as another kind of light source. So that has some clouds around it as well. Stamping out the running kids kind of in the exit area of the, I don't know, map or board or something like that. And when I say board, you know, we're just saying we're doing this in the spirit of a board game. It's not an actual game here. Okay, adding in some more textures down in the water areas. And I'm doing that with the water pattern small stamp. Okay, but I'm not going for full impressions just like with the pebbles. I'm just kind of tapping it around, using it for texture and kind of tone, okay? All right, now we're going to get through this fairly fast. I did spend quite a bit of time coloring this scene. This is a London Fog Memento ink, but it was kind of coming out real kind of bluish. I'm not quite sure why. I always thought that London Fog was a little bit more of a neutral gray than a cool gray. I don't know, it might be something in my re-inker bottle. Okay, I just put a few drops of re-inker fluid on this paper towel here. So again, I want to create this little pathway that looks illuminated. So can you see that little trail kind of looping around from the bottom left-hand corner and kind of looping through the swampland, going past the creature, the Black Lagoon, kind of going up there towards, you know, in the direction of that tropical area, but then kind of looping around kind of in an S-curve pattern back through the composition and up to those kids and into that illuminated area, you know, illuminated by the moon, okay? So utilizing that re-inker ink on this paper towel, makes things go by so much faster than just only using a stamp pad or something like that. You can get a good dollop of ink on your paper towel or sponge or whatever you're using and just apply that accordingly. All right, so here's the thing. I'm working, and I want to darken some of these areas, but on some of these objects in those areas, I want some of them to remain a little bit illuminated by the lighting, so it's not just coloring them in completely. It is rendering them kind of to make them look more rounded, and they look like volumes instead of a flat surface, which they are, but we want them to look rounded and opaque and have some visual weight to them, and that's how you do it with some additional tones. Okay, so now I have switched off from kind of a light blue. Now I'm working with black here, and I could only get so much black on there from the dye-based ink, so I switched to a VersaFine Clair here, although it is good to have the the thinner dye-based ink black underneath there. But the VersaFine Clair is just, as most stampers know, it's just a super dark black ink that can also handle quite a bit of detail. So I switched to that one. I wasn't quite sure how it would apply, but it pretty much applied just like it. In terms of the feel, it felt just like dye-based inks, but pigment inks are much more surface-oriented and thick, and in this case made my perimeters of this scene much darker, and that kind of helps in the framing process. Okay, creating kind of a stronger horizon line on my ocean stamp like this with the black VersaFine like that. See how it gives it a really nice horizon line there. Okay, switching off to a black colored pencil here. I have those tops of those rocks in there. That's where I said I'm trying to create kind of a visual passageway through this piece, through the scenario, whatever you want to call it. And there are those rocks. I'm just using the top portion of those rocks when I stamped it out. So I'm making a base area of it just with the colored pencil. And you just color the bottom portion nice and dark, and then you transition it a little bit into lighter tones for the top portion of those rocks so it looks nice and rounded, okay? It's the difference between coloring and shading. You want to shade kind of strategically as opposed to coloring something in completely uniform. Okay, so we're giving some visual weight to the creature by toning them in, adding some shadow work to them with the colored pencil. And I'm just talking about the moonlight up there casting its light, and therefore the creature at the Black Lagoon having these kind of elongated shadows, underneath them. And again, the colored pencil worked really great for that. Okay, adding some additional foreground into the scene. This reads large, and it's creating a little bit of visual depth down there, and kind of a textural, difference down there. I'm utilizing the smaller reeds here on those, slightly more distant rocks right there. All right. And doing some additional touch-up work, some tweaking, we're tweaking the shadows a little bit more as, whatever it's called for. And you're saying, well, how do you know what it's called for? Well, you can just kind of take a look at it, hold your pieces at arm's distance sometimes, and it's easier to tell if something needs something. Now, for me, I just wanted more contrast in those shadows. We have a lot of things going on in this scene. A lot of different zones, and I don't know, I just thought that bringing in kind of a wider range of contrast just within small areas could really help it look much more dimensional. Like the objects here, I'm toning in the darker areas of those clouds to make them look really puffy and billowy like that. So again, you just kind of hit it in those shaded areas. Okay, going underneath some of these waves. So you're just reiterating what's on the design itself and just making some of those darker areas on the design a little bit darker with your colored pencil. Okay, so you really utilize your colored pencil to make kind of light gray tones, but also, you know, when you need to, you can utilize it to go fairly dark. Okay, see, anchoring down my objects with a little bit of shade or shadows. All right, so I felt that this piece came together fairly well for the composition and lighting aspect of it. Okay, so adding in some of the leafless pine images, having something nice and kind of gritty and bony looking, you know. I don't know, these are kind of skeleton trees here, you might say. Adding in a couple of the smaller ones, a little bit more distant. And then I decided, as I was doing this, I would add in some of the larger leafless pine large here. And I did lay down some, or quite a bit of that Prismacolor wax, you know, colored pencil. So the StazOn is a really good one to use and stamp over that wax. You're never quite sure if it's going to stick to the wax, you know, from the colored pencil, but StazOn has the best chance of doing that. Okay, so each little area scene within this whole piece it seemed to have a little bit of a ghoul or something like that. So we added in the skeleton, a portion of the skeleton. That's by Good Stamp Goods, I believe, but a lot of people have I don't know, those copyright-free illustration types of pieces. Okay, so I added shadows over everything else. I'm adding the shadow in for this skeleton. It's kind of buried under the sand a little bit, or quite a bit, so just kind of upper torso is showing. And that's by design. We just kind of masked it off to do that. Okay, so adding in some white pigment ink here. And that's going to give the areas a little bit of a misty feel. It gives it a kind of a soft light to the scene when you add that mist in there. And where you add it is in areas where you've retained white, the white of the paper. And then you start tapping it in there, and then you move it into, you know, the darker areas closest to that lighting. And just add a little bit in there and see how it looks. So, see, I never really cover up any entire object with this pigment ink. It's usually a portion of an image, and it's a portion of an image that we've already, you know, created some shadow work with. You know, this is kind of one of the things that you add towards the, you know, the end part of the process here. Okay, so adding this throughout the piece, adding it from, you know, both the right side to the left, you know, we'll go top and bottom. Just be careful that you don't add too much, you know, of this. You want to kind of, I wouldn't say just right or something like that. I don't know, you know, it goes for, you know, to your preference, but I think it's the most effective, I believe, when you're using it. I wouldn't say sparingly, but just you want to oscillate the usage of it so that you have something crisp next to something that's soft, and therefore they play off each other. You know, one thing looks a lot crisper and sharper, and one thing looks a little bit softer, or quite a bit softer, being that they're right next to each other. Okay, so there you see it, you know, all that little pigment ink throughout the piece. Now this is a large 3mm white paint pen. Okay, they come in sets usually. And I'm adding in, you know, because this piece is so huge, I wanted to reiterate kind of the direction that, you know, a visitor to the park, or, you know, this fictional park, that they would follow. So I'm adding this kind of illuminated, I don't know, whatever pathway with these additional elements of light in the form of, you know, basically a white dot. Okay. It also can add in a little bit of a oh, I don't know, a kind of a shimmery, illuminated path to follow from a textural sense. Okay, this one is a extra fine point acrylic paint pen, and here I can do a lot of detail work with it. I thought I'd be using a lot of the pens, but I ended up using less than I would have thought. You know, sometimes I use as much of these little highlights just on this, you know, basically 11 by 17 two-page spread as I do on a quarter-page piece of cardstock. And I was speculating, I was wondering if it was because I spent a lot more time with the colored pencil on this piece, so you know, I took care of a lot of the shadow work, so thus I didn't have to do as much lighting work. Okay, this is some splatter painting with Dr. Martin's Bleed Proof White. Have it down there in that water section, you know, where maybe there's a struggle going on with that octopus and that person. Maybe they're being pulled down. I don't know. Whatever you see in it, that's the, you know, the correct interpretation. Okay, and putting some little eyeballs, kind of watching those people in the darkness, a la, you know, something like a Scooby-Doo or something like that. And this piece is almost done. I might do some signage in here, you know, kind of pointing out like the different areas or zones that you would see. I don't know, whatever, creature of the Black Lagoon Alley or something like that, you know. I don't know, I'll have to think of some creative names for these pieces. But anyways, I hope you like this very large piece, and thanks so much for watching.